course, the litter box turns on as soon as I start recording. Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Crue Trime. Crue Trime. Crue Trime. My name is Sarah, and what I do here is tell you a terrible story to ruin your day and put on my makeup at the same time. So if that sounds like fun to you, you are in the right place. So make sure you subscribe to this channel, turn on all of the notifications, and then that way you will never miss one of my terrible stories. Today's story is another survival case, but don't worry, it's still awful. Just the way you like it. This is the story of the Turpin family. Also, I don't really talk about the makeup as I'm using it, so if you want to know what it is, look down in the description box because everything is linked. In the early morning hours of January 14th, 2018, a sheriff's deputy in Paris, California, responded to a 911 call from a girl who'd run away from home.
This is 911. Do you have an emergency?
I just ran away from home.
Do you know what street you're on?
No.
17-year-old Jordan Turpin told the 911 operator that she and her 12 siblings were being abused by their parents. When Sheriff's Deputy Anthony Colace responded to the runaway call, he was wrapping up his overnight shift. And in his 9 years on the job, it was his experience that these kinds of calls typically wind up with the child being returned to their family after they've had some kind of disagreement. This kid was different.
I just ran away from home.
Okay.
And I live in a family of 15.
Okay.
My two little sisters right now are chained up.
They're chained up?
Yes.
Where are they chained up at?
On their bed. I'm sorry if I talk too much. Okay. I've never talked to anybody out there, so I've never been alone with a person, so this is very hard for me to talk.
She told the deputy that she and her siblings lived in filth. They hadn't had a bath in almost a year, and two of her sisters were chained to their beds. She showed him photos that she had on her cell phone, and the kids he saw were pitiful, sad, skinny, pale, bruised. So this young girl, Jordan, was terrified, shaking, and her story was all over the place, and the words that she used were a little weird. The deputy asked if she was on medication, and she said, "What's medication?"
Do you take any medication?
What's medication?
Medication?
Yeah, what's medication?
Do you take pills? Do you take pills?
Oh, I don't think I've ever taken a pill before.
Okay.
What? He asked her if she had any injuries, and she said, "What's injuries?" He said, "Are you hurt?" And the girl said, "Oh no, not right now." When he asked Jordan to spell her name for him, she couldn't. Now this is really weird. So Deputy Colace took Jordan in his police cruiser and asked her more questions about Jordan's life at home. She told him that her parents were physically abusive, their house was filthy, and it was so dirty that it was hard to breathe sometimes. She also explained that more than a couple of her siblings were chained up. So a couple hours later, a pack of sheriffs pulled up to the Turpin family home. It was a very normal, suburban, upscale kind of neighborhood. They knocked on the door for a solid 2 minutes before the door popped open. David and Louise Turpin stood there, wide-eyed, wondering what the heck they wanted.
We got a call for a check the welfare here at your house.
Yeah, why?
You guys have kids in the house?
Yes. Okay, what kind of call did you get?
How you doing, sir? I'm doing good. Okay.
We were just in bed. I mean,
Since Jordan had told the authorities and shown photographic evidence of child abuse, actively happening, the deputies were allowed to enter the Turpin home without having to get a search warrant. And what they found inside was everything Jordan described. Garbage piled up everywhere. The air was thick with the stench of urine and just absolute squalor. So as the deputies waded through these piles of trash and filth inside the house of horrors, they found the children's bedrooms. They found the kids, as they saw them in the pictures, pale, skinny, dirty, bruised, and some of them, yes, were chained to their beds. So how did we get here? Let's rewind all the way back to the beginning. Louise Ann Robinette was born on May 24th, 1968 in Princeton, West Virginia. Louise and her two siblings were raised in an extremely abusive household. From a very young age, Louise and her sisters were regularly sexually molested by their own grandfather. And their mother knew it. In fact, she would bring her girls to his house for him to have his way with them in exchange for financial support.
Instantly, I was like, yeah, no.
Despite this insanity, Louise's family were devout Pentecostal Christians, and they spent a lot of time in church. When Louise was in her early teen years, she met a nerdy young man at church named David. David Allen Turpin was born on October 17th, 1961 in West Virginia. He was 7 years older than Louise, but that did not stop their West Virginia romance.
We're just right down dirty, white, good old people, hillbillies.
Well, the two fell in love, and in 1985, when Louise was barely 16 years old and David was 23, she and David ran off and got married. David was 23 years old, so a full actual adult marrying a child.
Hillbillies.
David had graduated from Virginia Tech and worked as a computer engineer and was making a very decent living. So David and Louise were very religious. And part of their religion was the belief that children are a gift and a blessing from God, and marriage should be fruitful. Basically, a marriage should produce as many children as God allows. And it's their responsibility and duty as Christian parents to train the children to be obedient and then eventually become Christian disciples themselves. You know, cycle. Wash, rinse, repeat. So David and Louise got busy. By the year 2000, after being married for 15 years in Fort Worth, Texas, they'd had 8 children. I mean, that's not like a Duggar pace.
Oh, man, good job.
That's a lot of kids to have in 15 years. The pace actually slowed down a bit after that, and then they eventually topped out at 13 children in total. How could they afford so many kids, you ask? Well, as I mentioned, David was a very successful computer engineer, and he was well compensated by the companies he worked for over the years, including Lockheed Martin. Louise stayed at home with the children, and from the outside, they seemed like a happy family. And, you know, maybe a little weird, especially by like modern family size standards, but, you know, happy. When they moved from Fort Worth down to the tiny town of Rio Vista, things started getting really weird. Okay, so Rio Vista is like the country, very rural, tiny. Turns out the Turpins were secretly bankrupt. They withdrew from their extended family and from the public. They decided to homeschool the children, and in 2007, the Turpins moved 10 of the oldest kids out of the main house into a trailer on the property. At that time, there was only 12 kids. The 13th one had not been born yet. So they left these kids in this trailer to like fend for themselves. They once a week at best would bring groceries, but it was never enough to feed them all. If they were lucky, they got to eat once a day, and it would be like a bologna sandwich or a frozen burrito, like not what they needed. Jordan, you know, the girl that escaped in the very beginning of the story, she was around 6 years old at the time, and she said that there was a lot of starving, and it went on for years. David and Louise were also physically violent with the kids. Surprise. They would throw them around, they would hit them, they would tie them to their beds with ropes. Like, think of it, these kids, they're malnourished, they don't have any socialization because they got pulled out of school, they're dirty, they're hungry, like it's bad, everything's bad. So the Turpins started backing away from the church at this time, and they started experimenting with different religions. And according to Louise's sister, Teresa, Louise's beliefs on sexuality, especially within their marriage, started to evolve. Now, I'm not out here to yuck somebody's yum, but like, apparently David and Louise decided to open things up in their marriage. Teresa claims that her sister told her about some time between 2008 and 2010 that Louise met a man online and then arranged to meet him for a sexual rendezvous in Huntsville, Alabama. David drove her to this rendezvous. Like, What? Yeah, so David and Louise drove from Texas to Alabama, and then David waited in the hotel parking lot while Louise went inside to do the sex with the man.
Oh, man.
When they were gone, the older children had been left behind to, take care of their younger siblings, and that is what gave David and Louise the freedom to go on these wild adventures. In 2010, David took a job as a defense contractor, and the family moved to Marietta, California, which is an upper middle class suburb in Southern California. David and Louise renewed their wedding vows at a Las Vegas wedding chapel in October of 2011. This is so weird. This is a weird little nugget to me. Like, think about this hellscape of their family home with these skinny, starving kids chained to their beds. But then David and Louise are running off to renew their wedding vows. They did that like 3 different times over the years. And they would dress the kids up in these like matching outfits and parade them around. Weird. This 2011 vow renewal in Vegas was made of their children identically dressed, making up their wedding party. And the wedding officiant was, of course, an Elvis impersonator. So
From this day. Forever. Yeah.
The next year, the family took a trip to Disneyland. They posed for pictures wearing matching t-shirts. And this is like the best/worst part. David and Louise were Disney adults. Oh yeah. They had vanity license plates on their cars. One said DS Land and the other one said DL Forever. These two nutsos would parade around their bruised children around Disneyland at least 2 different trips. But otherwise, these kids were trapped in the house. No school, no friends, no doctors, no food. Also, you need to understand that David and Louise were buying food and clothes and toys for the kids, but they wouldn't let them have them. They kept it locked up. They would buy these toys that were left purposefully unopened, and the food was specifically only for mother and father. That's what they made the children call them. And if the kids were caught stealing food, David and Louise would beat the shit out of them or chain them up as punishment. Mind games. These motherfuckers would leave pies out on the table, like apple pies, holiday pies, food, pies, in front of these starving children, but then tell them they weren't allowed to have dessert. It was too much sugar. And the heartbreaking part of it, if all of that wasn't disturbing enough, is that these kids never once even imagined disobeying their parents. They were 100% brainwashed. Mother and father were in charge. They needed to fall in line, and they were terrified of what they would do if they disobeyed. So in 2014, the Turpin family moved again, and this time it was to a 4-bedroom home in Paris, California, about 70 miles east of Los Angeles in Riverside, like outside of Riverside. And this is what became known as the House of Horrors, but the nightmarish life for the Turpin children had been going on for years by then. Neighbors would later say that the children were completely silent, never speaking to anyone but each other, and they were all very skinny and pale. So the Turpin children were essentially held captive inside this house, and they were eating ketchup to stay alive. By 2018, 17-year-old Jordan and a 13-year-old sister knew that they were running out of time. They had overheard their parents discussing moving again, this time to Oklahoma. So just after 5 a.m. on January 14th, 2018, Jordan and her sister snuck out of the house through a window. The younger sister got scared and actually ran back to the house, but Jordan kept running. They had been planning this for 2 years, even though Jordan had actually never been outside. She didn't really know what to do or where to go, but she was ready to die trying. Jordan had actually found an old cell phone in the house that had been deactivated, but 911 always works. Did you guys know that? Even if your phone says no service or it's been deactivated, when you dial 911, it works because it will go to any available tower. Tip from me to you. Okay, so Jordan called 911 for help, the sheriff arrived, and now we're back to the beginning of the story. So when the sheriffs busted David and Louise Turpin on the morning of January 14th, 2018, about 2 hours after Jordan's brave escape, the 13 Turpin children all appeared to be minors at first. The youngest was about 2 years old, so that's pretty obvious, but they later learned that 7 of the 13 children were actually adults ranging in age from 18 to 29. They had suffered so many years of starvation and neglect and abuse that their growth was stunted from malnourishment. The oldest daughter was actually 29 years old. She weighed a shocking 82 pounds. She looked like an elementary school student. Well, the kids were all taken to an area hospital where they were cleaned and fed and treated for a host of physical impairments and damage. Public records would later show that the Turpin address was listed in a state Department of Education directory as the location of the Sandcastle Day School, a private K-12 campus, with David Turpin listed as the principal. 6 of the Turpin children were listed as students. Now remember, 17-year-old Jordan didn't know how to spell her own name or the words medication or injuries, so like a real quality education going on in this house. It was all just like super bizarre too. I mean, in addition to all this abuse that was happening in the house, they would stay up all night. They would all go to bed at 4 a.m., sleep all day. They were like on this weird reverse schedule. Funny enough, and maybe funny is not the right word, but the kids were also allowed to / instructed to write in journals, which the investigators promptly seized to help build out their case. It documented everything. So obviously, David and Louise could not provide a logical explanation of why their children were chained to the beds. They were both arrested on suspicion of torture and child endangerment, and they were held on $9 million bail. They were later charged with 12 counts of torture, 12 counts of false imprisonment, 7 counts of abuse of a dependent, and 6 counts of child abuse. David received an additional charge of a lewd act on a child under the age of 14. Ick. They both pled not guilty. Of course. Well, after sitting in jail for a while, thinking about it, by February 22nd, 2019, 57-year-old David and 50-year-old Louise knew that their collective goose was cooked. They both entered plea agreements for a reduced number of the charges. At their sentencing hearing, they both addressed the court expressing their remorse for what they did to their kids.
I never intended for any harm to come to my children. I'm sorry if I've done anything to cause them harm.
I pray for my children every day. I want to say again, I'm truly sorry. I am for everything I've done to hurt them. I love them more than they could ever imagine.
You look real upset for somebody who had their kids chained up. Okay? Spare me. David and Louise were both sentenced to life in prison with a possibility of parole after 25 years. David is serving his time at the California State Prison, and Louise is in the Central California Women's Facility. They will be 82 and 75 years old, respectively, when they're eligible for parole the first time, if they live that long. Now, you would think that with David and Louise in prison, the Turpin children would be out of harm's way. But turns out the foster family that took them in wasn't much better than their own monstrous parents, and they were subjected to physical and sexual abuse. The foster parents, Marcelino and Rosa Alguin, and their daughter, Lenice, were arrested and later charged with child endangerment, and they were sentenced to 4 years of probation each. Probation, give me a break. After the court case ended, 5 of the younger Turpin children were adopted, and conservatorships were appointed for the rest of the siblings. But their cases have been so mismanaged, it's really a shame. The donations that came in to support the Turpin children weren't distributed properly, and lawyers were unhelpful. Some of the siblings were homeless, and none of them had any real life skills or training. I mean, it just really added shit to a shitty situation. 6 of the Turpin children actually filed a lawsuit against Riverside County and the foster care agency that was tasked with protecting them. The identities of the Turpin children have been largely protected, and most of the court records have been placed under seal. They continue to try to move forward with their lives, seeking independence, health and just learning how to live a normal life. Jordan and Jennifer Turpin have been the most vocal of the siblings, telling their story on 2020 and some other interviews. 6 years after her brave escape, Jordan Turpin is now a popular social media influencer and has over 1 million followers on TikTok. She's also signed with a major modeling agency and is living in Southern California. And that is the story of the Turpin family. Again, if you want to know what makeup I used in today's look, then just look down in the description box because everything is linked. If you have a Crue Trime story that you want to recommend to me, also check in the description box for the link to the Google Doc. You can click it, fill in all the dirty details. I would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for hanging out today and for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this one, then consider subscribing to this channel before you leave today. I upload new videos here on YouTube every week, and you can follow me on all of the other socials as well. That is it for now. I will catch you next time in the next video. Bye! Okay. Let me get myself together. Fucking come on. In the... what the fuck? The logical exponent... 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Math is hard. What am I doing? I need to secure my bangs. Overheard their parents disgusting. Oh yeah, they were disgusting. Does not look good, but moving forward.